your home, when you bought it, it's probably appreciated a significant amount. But if you haven't talked to your insurance agent in a while, right? A lot of the people that we're trying to call, they're not necessarily upset about their premium. They're upset that their $750,000 house is only insured for $500,000.
Got questions, we bring the facts. From proven pros who walk the tracks. Business life, no smoke, just flames. Ask the experts, David Williams brings the game.
All right, good morning, Insurance Syndicate Group. It is that time, it is that day again for another episode of Ask the Experts. We are committed to bringing you value and just amazing experts, and we are excited for our guest today. He is somebody that I'm going to allow Andy to give him his proper due introduction, but he's somebody he's a family man. He's a superhero. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's absolutely just crushing it in business and in life, and he's going to be dropping tons of knowledge bombs. My good friend, Mr. Rob Young, is on the call today. And folks, I'm going to have to drop off the call because, as you see, I'm on the way to my event in Miami for charity for kids. But we're committed to doing this show every single week. And I emphasize committed, showing up, being here every week for every single one of you guys. And I just wanted to at least jump on, kick it off before I lose signal, and just start the call, fire up the call, and I'm going to let Andy take it away. And Rob, just wanted to give you a big thank you for joining us today, and thank you in advance for all the wisdom and the knowledge bombs you are about to drop into the group. So make sure everybody stay on the call, tune in. You are in for a treat.
Great to have you, Rob, and thank you, Dave, so much for the introduction. Rob, I want to let people know who you are, because I had the great pleasure of meeting you about a year ago in person, which was a great experience. And for those of you who don't know of Rob or his company, Phone Home Leads, let me fill you guys in a little bit about his background. So he is the founder of a company called Phone Home Leads. If you haven't heard of them, you can find them at phonehomeleads.com. And he's the architect of targeted solutions for insurance agents, not broad solutions. He has a project management, e-commerce, and solutions architecture background, which I love. And we're going to talk a little bit about how his background is maybe a little bit different from some of the other solutions that are out there. And he built his entire career around innovation. He's a native of Whitehall, Arkansas, a graduate of, I hope I'm not messing this up, is it Ouachita? Ouachita Baptist University. Mm-hmm. And his passion for tech fuels his entrepreneurial spirit, alongside his wife, Jane, who is a Pinnacle Elite Allstate agent, and their 3 kids. Robert's helping reshape the way agent success affordable and effective leads. So, Rob, it's so great to have you, man. You have an incredible background. Thank you for being with us today.
No, thank you again for being with us. I'm going to tune off. My signal's already getting a little bit choppy here on the road, but just wanted to come in and give you the recognition you deserve, and heartfelt thank you for being on the show, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, David.
All right, Rob. So we're going to dive right in. Our style here is that we're going to go through and try to extract all that amazing expertise that you have to the best of our ability. So
can't wait to disappoint.
You're not going to disappoint. It's literally impossible. It's impossible. So I know that your journey into the lead game in the insurance world actually started with some real world challenges and opportunities within your wife's agency. And I was wondering if you could just kind of walk us through, first of all, some of the challenges that she might have faced inside her agency, and then how you kind of look at it from your background and developed this innovative solution to address those challenges.
Sure. So one of the things that we were looking at, so my wife opened Scratch in 2019. And what anybody knows, opening Scratch, you have no incoming revenue. It's not going to come in, right? So everything that you're paying for, it's all coming out of pocket. And because we're in a rural area, your opportunity to get leads or, those live call transfers and stuff like that may be a little limited, especially when you're hyper local and you're trying to be hyper local. So we had conversations with vendors, and we're talking $80, $100, $130 leads. At the time, I was working remote in her office, And I heard her say that. I'm like, we can't do that. Right. And so we started looking at, okay, well, what can we do? Obviously you want those mortgage referrals, you want all those different types of things. And we knew to grow a healthy book of business, we wanted to start with homes. We needed phone numbers of people to call. It needed to be compliant. And so we just started working the problem. And it became a step-by-step basis of what do we need? And then, solving for that problem. And one of the things that we found were there were a lot of vendors out there that do a thing well, right? There's a lot of people out there that do some great things. And so we tried to cherry pick some of those things and start building a solution there. And so we started seeing some really good growth with Janie's agency. Other agents started asking, what are you doing? Right? How are you growing? How are you doing this? And then, it started picking up. And then, long story short, became an all-state select vendor after going through an ear, nose, and throat exam, where they look through financials and everything. But word of mouth kind of caught on. But it really sort of took hold to those agents that maybe just don't have a budget to spend tens of thousands of dollars on leads every month. Some of those hometown agents, some of those agents that they're like, I just need a shot. I just need a chance to be able to talk to somebody. Okay, let me see what I can do to try to help you out. And that's really where we went from that. And so kind of went from an agent's first perspective. And I came from, it was almost good I didn't come from the lead market. I came from a solutions architecture e-commerce market. Because of that, I don't think I was necessarily jaded or tainted, or I could look at the problem with a clear set of eyes. And I think that kind of worked to Phone Home Lead's benefit.
100%. And for those of you that are on here that don't understand how Phone Home Leads works, I think it can be a great lesson in innovation, because what you're talking about is facing the same challenge a lot of other agents face, but then taking a fresh perspective on it and solving for that problem and reverse engineering it. And
correct.
I think some of those moments of creativity is where the best solutions are created, instead of just trying to follow the book of what everybody else is doing. You guys took this completely different direction. But can you kind of walk through the journey of what a phone home lead looks like, where it comes from, how it's worked, just for those that don't understand that blueprint?
Yeah. So if you think about it, when it comes to people that are in the insurance game, you could look at it almost like a homeowner X date, right? So it's a homeowner X date. These are people that we think are most likely coming up for renewal. So when we started, it was 2019. And when you think about 2019, what were mortgage interest rates? They were 2%, 3%. Like, it was something insanely low. So a lot of people have purchased their homes, but also a lot of people were refinancing. So it was important to look at it a little bit differently. I didn't necessarily want to look at when was the home purchased. I wanted to look at when somebody refinanced, because where do our best mortgage referrals come from? Your mortgage broker, right? And so you're kind of backdooring into that. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to look for mortgage dates, and then, really identify, okay, so most people bind their homeowner's insurance with their mortgage, or it's in escrow with their mortgage. That's not the case. It's more often the case than it's not, right? And so then the other piece of that is you want to make sure to find out the phone number or the contact information for the person that owns that mortgage. Now, sometimes that could be different than the person that actually lives in the home, if they're a landlord or something like that. And then we want to sort of clarify that and then say, okay, who's on the do not call list? Who isn't? You can't call somebody. You can't cold call somebody that's on a do not call list.
Yeah.
And then there were some extra steps of, okay, well, we can go out and look and see, is your phone number connected? Have you made a phone call in the past 30 days or not? And so what we found was, with traditional data leads, you may make 100 phone calls, get 10 people to answer, you get one quote. And I'm speaking in generalities here.
Yep.
So after we started going through the process and started analyzing the data and going through running some queries on certain things, we were able to get that to more like about 1 out of every, or 10 answers out of every 40 dials. And so that was, kind of a big piece. And so it wasn't so much building the lead so much as creating attrition of these giant data sets that exist out there in the ether. And so, and then enriching that and working with that. So it's interesting, because some people may say, well, there are other vendors that maybe do something like this. I view myself more of like a data as a service. So a lot of the people that some people may think would be a competitor of Phone Home Leads, really, they usually win when I win or when Phone Home Leads wins. Because I probably have some sort of contract or arrangement with them to draw some of those good pieces from this vendor, a good piece from this vendor. So if there are any vendors watching, I'm not necessarily competition. I'm more of like an enrichment tool for those vendors, which is kind of interesting. And that's some of the tools that we built as well. It's like, okay, can we improve the list? Can we get a value add on the data that you're already collecting, right? Is there something that we can do in real time to enhance for these people? And so, it's not like I'm necessarily doing some magic, but I've got agreements with multiple vendors to build these lists for people.
Beautiful. And what do you see as in just the lead game in general? And I'm not in this case talking about Phone Home Leads specifically, but when we talk about purchased internet leads, we talk about cold X states, all these things. Where do you feel like the biggest misunderstanding is, or some of the knowledge gaps where agents may just dive into the lead game, but there's maybe some things that they don't understand yet that could cause them to give up on it too soon? Like, what do you see traditionally as the biggest like misconception about leads in general?
Yeah, a lot of agents want it to be a solved problem, or they believe there's a silver bullet. I've never found a silver bullet for anything. Like silver bullets usually look a lot like getting the reps in, is what I've noticed. Like there's no such thing as a silver bullet. So all we can do is be transparent and honest in how we're building these things. So for instance, the other day I was listing a car on, I wanted to see like a Kelly Blue Book type service. Okay. It wasn't that, but it was one of those services. And I listed it. I wanted to see how much, value I could get if I traded in or something like that. Within 30 seconds of me posting that on there, I got a call for a quote for car insurance. Okay. It was somebody from this. I see you're shopping for auto insurance. So what was that? That was my name going in there as a lead just because I was looking to sell a car. Right. So a lot of people, they don't think through sort of the thought process of a prospect going through that lead funnel. Right. So they tend to play a game of, so I'm from e-commerce, revenue equals acquisition times conversion rate times average order value. Okay. So if you deconstruct that, if you get a lot of acquisition in there, a lot of people into your funnel, and you kind of have a use telemarketers or something like that because you have a low conversion rate or whatever, and then you get certain things, you can increase the revenue by driving up that acquisition and getting those numbers really, really large, right? If your conversion rate's low. What I wanted to see in the lead world was I tried to kind of focus on higher conversion rates, higher average order values. And okay, I'm going to go back to where you were asking about the lead thing. What I think a lot of people are missing is they're not paying attention to the prospects and the flow and what that experience is for them. I got called by, two separate people. They prepped it and then they ultimately sent me to an insurance agent because that's a good lead for me, right? If somebody goes through. And then I had a conversation with them, but that experience was not good for me as a customer. And then if you think about for a homeowner lead, so when it comes to auto leads, I get it. Like that's sort of seen as like a low friction point, low anxiety barrier to entry to get into that lead.
Yeah.
When it comes to homeowner leads, who fills out a lead form to get a quote for a home? Like, think about that a little bit. Somebody that's mad at their agent because they didn't do their roof claim. They want to stick it to them. Now I've got a lead for somebody that's probably a troubled child that's going to shop it anytime they have a bad experience, right?
Yeah.
Like that's who I envision. So I wanted to avoid that. And so, especially when it comes to homeowner leads, when I kind of thought through the entire process of how you get in that funnel, I just think the quality is not necessarily that good. Whereas anyway, I think that's where the misconception is. People want it to be like a solved problem. They want it to be, oh, they definitely are going to bind with me when they go through that process. That prospect hasn't talked to you yet. They don't know what type of agent you are. They don't know all these things. Like, yeah, maybe they're verified, but how did they get to that verification process? Why were they in the funnel in the first place? And it may be a troubled child, and you're potential for retention on that client may be kind of low, and so that's at least anecdotally, like when I think through that process, that's how I think about it.
Perfect. No, I actually really like your technical breakdown from an e-commerce perspective, where you broke down the numbers and how you math out scalability. I think
Yeah.
I got to go back and watch that. If anybody didn't like write that down, I would recommend going back and breaking that down 100 times till you understand it. Because guys from the e-commerce space and girls from the e-commerce space look at things in a completely different fashion, and it's very numbers driven, and it's just really interesting to hear an e-commerce perspective brought in the insurance space.
So think about it. A lot of insurance agents are going to look at it the same way for direct mail. So you could send a piece of direct mail, and if most people throw that stuff away, right? And so you have to do something to distinguish yourself. And so the way to get past that, especially if you're in a massive metro area, is if I've got a 0.1% conversion rate, I've got to send out a lot more pieces, right? That's one way to think about it. And if I'm doing autos, let's say that's a mono line or maybe a double, mono line or something like that, my average order value for that piece, my potential revenue from that piece may be kind of low, right? So you're spending a lot of money to send out a lot of pieces. So I'm making a parallel here to e-commerce. Like once you get to large numbers, you can start kind of predicting revenues and stuff like that. So another way to look at it is, okay, is there a way where I can increase? So if you think about, if I get a home, I'm going to get the 2 autos. If I get the 2 autos, I should be able to get an umbrella. If I get an umbrella, I should be able to set a life appointment. Like that's a way to look at it. So your average order value, your potential revenue from a given person should be much, much higher. And most insurance companies, that's what they want. They want that good prospect, right? So your profitability from that prospect is going to be a lot higher. And then usually when you get all those lines, your retention is going to be much higher as well. So that's kind of one of the things I like to break down is, okay, can you play with the average order value? How do you deconstruct that? Can you play with the conversion rate? How do you work with that? And then can you play with the acquisition? How do you work with that? And then can you think of your prospects flow to get into that? Right. And sort of think about all those disparate pieces. Anyway, that's what we try to do, right? Almost everything that we do at Janie's agency is incredibly intentional. We've thought about it about as deep as you can get. Like somebody could come in. I don't believe in being accidentally successful. I don't think that exists. Like it certainly hadn't happened for us. Everything needs to be thoroughly thought out, and then we should be able to get to the why on every single step. Well, why? I don't want to get caught in that. And
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote down conversion. If the conversion rate is low, you need to increase your volume. And if the conversion rate is high, you can actually send a lower volume of activity and gain a larger result, especially if you're paying attention to what product or ticket value you're driving them to. So I think it's a huge lesson to be learned, because you can throw as much money as you want at tens of thousands of opportunities, but you might be working really, really hard instead of smart, where if you just take a different approach to the market and you're very intentional like you guys are, you can actually get a lot more out of a lot less activity, right?
And again, it can work, right? Like you can acquisition your, a low conversion rate, right? Like you can do that.
We see it all the time, agents purchasing tens of thousands of leads. I mean,
yeah, sure. And that's fine. That works great in some markets. So you've got some markets where if you're in a giant metro area, maybe that makes the most economic sense. You can't do that in rural areas. The volume's not there. Like you just can't, or they're more sensitive to this, or they're more, they want that kind of personal touch to a certain degree, right? They're not going to get into that funnel. They're probably not online shopping, for homeowner insurance. If they're if they're in a local place, they're going to call their banker that they go to church with. Yeah. Right. And say, hey, who's the guy that we trust, or who's the guy that's on my baseball team or whatever. They're not going to be going
feed store.
Yeah. And again, I'm not dogging on that. I'm merely saying that that's the approach that we took, because in some cases, especially if you're a scratch agent, you already have big dogs in there. So you've got to think of a way to sort of distinguish yourself and think of the problem differently. Now, it's not like I intentionally went into there, right? I was just trying to make my wife happy. You know, like I built phone home leads for her, and then it just kind of grew. But you know, it's still thinking about the problem and not being influenced by other things. So I tried to take a first principles approach to it. Who do we want to talk to? A homeowner, especially during COVID. Most people's homes were drastically underinsured, and we're finding that that's still usually the case. You know, how many people, most people that are listening to this, your home when you bought it, it's probably appreciated a significant amount. But if you haven't talked to your insurance agent in a while, right? A lot of the people that we're trying to call, they're not necessarily upset about their premium. They're upset that their $750,000 house is only insured for $500,000, right? That's a good prospect. That's a good client.
Mhm.
And that's, you know, who we're trying to get in touch with.
I love this. I think that the biggest lesson to myself, and probably a lot of people here as well that I'm hearing, is like you had to take time out of the busyness and the regular day to day to go through this creative process and go through, you know, what do we want to achieve? Who are we trying to reach? To what are the best ways to do that? And I think that's something that a lot of business owners get caught up in, is they just get into the daily grind. They don't take the time. And like Dave, who just introed this call today, it's one thing I learned from him years ago. He's like, sometimes you've just got to take a drive, or you've got to put the top down, or you got to sit in a silent space and create a little bit of distance from your business and start to break this thing down. So I think that's a really good reminder for anybody here that yep, go ahead.
The best piece of advice I ever heard, and this was from a company called Marketing Sherpas, there's no such thing as expert marketers, only expert testers and experienced marketers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if you think about that, right, like you can have your idea, you can have whatever, but you have to test it. And even if you fail, you need to learn from that.
Mhm.
Right. So a failure isn't necessarily a failure. A failure is a potential for a learning. And then you take that learning and you apply it. Right. Like if you failed, okay, let's post-mortem that. Let's figure out why it failed. Let's learn from it and keep going and, you know, try to test it. Now, I know coming up with objective measures and for insurance agents or any business sometimes can be hard, especially if you're busy, like you just don't have that time. So you're kind of, normally you're working with anecdotal sort of, okay, it feels this way, but, you know, take that time to do a recap of the month, or, you know, and then just kind of put a stamp in it, and then wait 90 days and then look back at your 90 days. And normally if you're being consistent with that process of I'm testing, you don't think you're making improvements, but you look back 90 days from now, you're like, oh, I got a 7% increase. And if you do that, you know, do that at scale, you know, you really start seeing some improvements. But that's some of the best advice I'd ever heard. It's like, oh yeah, no, anybody that says I'm an expert marketer, I don't know that I believe that. They should be expert testers, because there's science behind testing. There's not necessarily science behind marketing. Everything changes. You know, if you think you've got it down, I'm sorry, AI is here, right? Like if you're not using AI, you're losing, or you will. It's inevitable. So, you know, you need to be able to test with that, use that, leverage those instances if you can.
Beautiful. We're going to come back to the AI piece too, because I'd love to pick your brain on it. But
sure.
On this next one, I'm going to give a big disclaimer. Rob, you're not an attorney, right? You're not a lawyer?
I am not an attorney. Okay. Very much not. I come from a family of attorneys. I could not be an attorney if I tried. It sounds terrible.
I'm with you. So big disclaimer, neither Rob or myself are attorneys, but
that's correct.
Because you're in the lead game, and I know this doesn't necessarily affect you at Phone Home Leads, but I'll just tell you what I hear every day. We've got this new TCPA legislation that's going into effect. And to be honest, in the number of conversations we have with leaders and agents out in the space, it's stirred up a lot of concern, a lot of questions. And I've found that more times than not, when I speak with an agency, they haven't even fully wrapped their arms around how it's going to impact the market. It's a lot of, what do you think is going to happen? You know, and what do you think is going to happen? And I'm curious, as you've kind of like meditated on that, I'm curious about your thoughts on the new regulations, the good, the bad, the ugly, and just your overall like opinion on how that's going to actually affect agents in the long run.
Yeah. So I think you're starting to see some people, some of the smart agents, you're starting to notice that they're starting to acquire leads a little bit more directly, right? With their social channels and certain things. And they're like, okay, reach out to this. I think personally, it's going to shift more to a, okay. So in that scenario that I talked about where I listed the car, it went up. I put the car up. I got a call ultimately from an Allstate agent, but the intermediary there that called me got all my information, and then they probably shopped it around to multiple agents. I did not consent to that specific agent. I mean, I'm sure I checked box somewhere where they could sell it ultimately to somebody. But my information went up into kind of like this magical eBay in the sky, and then somebody decided to bid on it, get it, and then that's who bought the lead, right? The big change that's coming down is one-to-one consent. Okay, so normally people give consent. Okay, it could be resold or whatever, but now it's one-to-one. If you think about the intention behind it, what was happening, you have these, and again, no knock on it, but you have these giant call centers that are calling, they're getting this information, and they're ultimately bidding it, and maybe they're getting, it costs them $30 to get it, and then they're selling it for $20 a pop to multiple agents or something along those lines. Like that, again, I'm not in that world, but that's just kind of what it seems like to me. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, if I'm the FCC, I'm going to want to go through and be like, all right, that's not necessarily fair. Like, yes, we need to have solicitation. We need to have we need to be able to support small business. But if that means, somebody's getting robocalled or something like that, like crazy, that's not a good customer experience. So I'm just going to read this from the FCC ruling. So the FCC plans to implement one-to-one consumer consent by changing the definition of prior written consent. So this change takes effect on January 27th, 2025. There's a lot of sort of FCC kind of legalese there. And again, I commissioned an attorney to sort of work with me to make sure that I understand it, that I'm in compliance and stuff like that. But the term prior written consent, the prior express written consent means an agreement in writing that bears the signature of the person called or texted that clearly and conspicuously authorizes no more than one identified seller to deliver or cause to be delivered to the person called or texted advertisements or telemarketing messages using an automatic telephone dialing system or an artificial pre-recorded voice. Calls and texts must be logically and topically associated with the interaction that prompted the consent, and the agreement must identify the telephone number to which the signatory authorized such advertisements or telemarketing messages to be delivered. So if I'm on the do not call list, right, and I put it on there, I sign some form. So I go to the mall, I enter for a chance to win a grill or something like that, right? Or I could win a trip to the Bahamas or something. But me filling out that card to win a trip to the Bahamas ultimately gets me called by 20 different insurance agents. Like that, I think that sort of breaks the term one-to-one direct written consent. Now, if I'm Jane Doe, if I'm Janie Young Allstate and I'm saying, hey, fill this out for a quote, and then you may win a grill, that's a different conversation. Now, again, I'm not an insurance agent either. So if I'm messing up some of those wordings or the terminology or whatever, excuse me. But it sounds to me like that one-to-one consent is what it means, one-to-one consent. The second you introduce potentially a third party, right, that's not directly associated with you or something like that, my takeaway is that it kind of breaks it, especially if somebody's on the do not call list, right? Also, when it comes in there, so the commission, when we were looking into this, it looks like the commission made it clear that this one-to-one consent rule is meant to stop robocalls and robotexts, which is a clear new definition of expressed prior consent, as that term now means authorizing no more than one identified seller to deliver or cause to be delivered to the person called or texted advertisements or telemarketing messages using an automatic telephone dialing system or an artificial or pre-recorded voice. Okay, now this is coming directly from sort of those hearings. So the next piece that I would ask if I were in your case, okay, so what defines an automatic telephone dialing system? Okay, that should be your next question. So they defined that in a federal court case. Federal courts have further helped define automatic telephone dialing system, stating, accordingly, the undersigned concludes that the definition of an ATDS, as interpreted by FCC's 2003, 2008, 2012 orders, covers any equipment that has specified capacity to generate numbers and dial them without human intervention, regardless of whether the numbers called are randomly or sequentially generated or come from calling lists. Therefore, the primary consideration is whether human intervention is required at the point in time at which the number is dialed. Okay. So think about that. Okay, is human intervention required? So, if you're like, okay, it's any auto dialer or something like that, and it doesn't require human intervention, think about that. Now, again, not a lawyer, not whatever, but I know if it was like if you just take automatic telephone dialing system at face value and not look at the definition, my contact list on my phone would potentially run into that, right? But I'm making a human interaction to intentionally make that call. So therefore, if human intervention is required at the point in time in which the number is dialed, the telephone dialing system would not be considered automatic. That's just kind of how we saw that. So when we're talking about, and this is coming directly from the court cases and those things. Now, anything that I'm saying here cannot be used. You can't this is counsel that was given to me. It can't be necessarily reused. Like, you have to engage your own counsel and all sorts of stuff like that. But one of the things
100%.
that I had people asking me, because I was never worried about TCPA, because I do not sell a phone number that is on a do not call list. Okay. I just don't. For multiple reasons, but it keeps me out of just a lot of trouble. Or just complexity that I didn't want to deal with. I didn't want Janie to deal with or anything like that.
100%.
So I had some people ask me, hey, how does that update affect you? And I looked at it and I was like, it doesn't at all. Because I'm generally selling to first parties, and then those first parties are only calling people that are not on a do not call list. So that's how I think people affect it or are going to be affected. I think it could disrupt the lead game, but what it's going to do, I think what that'll do for the lead market is people are just going to have to innovate.
Do you think that
on how they generate leads? Go ahead.
Do you think that paid internet leads, just think of a traditional $10 Google driven lead from a big box company. Do you think that because they're unable to resell that lead now 5, 10, 15 times to different people, that they'll just proportionally increase the price to offset the loss? Or do you think they'll just take the hit? Or what do you think?
I mean, supply and demand.
Yeah.
Right. If the supply goes down, now I guess you could put it in there or I guess you could put the contact information in there and maybe checkbox the potential people it would go to,
Yeah.
Maybe. And again, that's not my world, right? Yeah. I'm a data as a service. That's not my world. I don't know, but supply and demand is the supply. Like, I would argue the supply would go down. Or excuse me, the supply would go down and potentially the demand is going to go up. Yeah. Right. So what does that do to prices? Yeah. So I don't have a crystal ball, but that's just been my experience.
Probably. Yeah.
Right.
I get that question all the time. What do you think? And I guess we'll have to see, but it's great in your case, what you've created is one of those innovative solutions that really won't be impacted by this, which is great. How much of a factor does the sales team play a factor, their skill set, their ability to call cold data? I know you've been able to witness, like in Janie's agency, sort of I've heard her, by the way, she's really good at opening up a phone call to a homeowner. But how do you see sort of the skill set there? Is it something that any agency can learn? Do they need seasoned people? Like what do they need from a human capital standpoint to make something like your solution work?
Sure. I think any agency can learn it if they're willing to learn it. Okay. One of the things that I've seen is if the sub producer is conditioned to have that sort of lead handed over, or they're not willing to kind of create a professional mindset around their process, then it can fail. They need to be intentional about how they're talking. They need to be a person, right? This isn't a transactional conversation. These are people that aren't expecting your phone call, but at the same time, they need it. Okay. And also with phone home leads, these aren't people that are getting called by 20 different agents. this is probably the only phone call that they've gotten like this. And so there are challenges in that it's cold, but it's a little bit warmer because we're calling them right at their renewal. Okay. For their homeowners insurance. So they probably just got their insurance paperwork on their home and they're like, oh my gosh, this is very expensive, or it went up a lot. And now you're making that phone call and they're like, I just got my renewal documentation. You're right. I do need to shop it, or those types of things. So I highly encourage people to think about what phone home leads are. I think as long as the agent and the sub producers understand what these are, the challenge doesn't have to be that hard. You still have to get your reps in, kind of learn the common objections. We've got a script to get you through that first 30 seconds. But it is very important to be intentional with your conversations. If you call up and say, hey, I see you're looking for a homeowner's quote, that's not true. They're going to hang up. Right. And so we've got a script to get you through that first 30 seconds. And, so I think it could work for a lot of agents, specifically rural agents. There are some big, massive agents, it's almost like turning the Titanic. Okay. And so, they already have their revenue stream figured out. But what I do know, and so my leads are also exclusive. So once I sell them to you, I'm not going to sell them to anybody else. That's just, I feel like it's the right thing to do. So that's what I do. But it's important to, work on your process. You can meet with Janie, learn how to use these. Like, she goes through training calls to kind of teach them how to use these in the first 30 seconds. We get great responses to that. There's a lot of really great stuff that you could learn from the wife. I'm constantly impressed at it's like watching Rembrandt paint when I hear her on a sales call. But there's a lot of information that you can get from there, from her, and then you just start working the process, and you have to get you got to get your reps in. It is a harder lead, but at the same time, it's more rewarding. We just had a sub producer off these write 30 items from one call. That was pretty large, right? Like that's not something that always happens, but obviously, that was a big deal. And that's not probably somebody that's going to be in your typical lead form on an internet lead, right? You would have to call them.
And they're probably price sensitive shoppers, and they're doing it, they're probably price motivated in many cases, whereas something like this, you make the connection, you're brave enough to actually enter that conversation.
So price and value. So, there's two sides to that force, right? You've got the price force, and then you also have the value force, right? So that sort of goes back to when I was talking about, conversion rates, or when I was talking about average order values and, people's homes being drastically underinsured. You've got a price force and a value force. A lot of the people that I talk to, a lot of agents that I talk to, if we can play up the value of the policy, it may end up being more expensive, but maybe per square foot, it's less expensive or something like that, but you're not just playing the cheapest price game. And there's a place for that, but you're not just playing the cheapest price game. If there's a way that we can get that value up, I believe that increases your chance for multi-lining and increases your chances for retention. Because now you've found a giant gap in their coverage that you're now fixing, and you're building trust, and you're building credibility with that prospect. And worst case scenario, that person takes it back to their existing insurance agent, and, you're still doing a moral good, right? Like, now if they're insured properly, you can either sell it or not, but worst case scenario, that, you've done a good thing for that person, which I also think is important.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100% it is. And here's an area I want to dive into with this, where I know the value of data, right? Obviously, you're in the data game. So it's so valuable to me that what you generate for somebody is a everlasting piece of data. Like, just because they don't pick up the phone today doesn't mean they're not a buyer 6 months from now, a year from now. So what's your stance on repurposing data in the long run, either in retargeting online through social media platforms with paid ads, or email campaigns, or opt-in text campaigns? Do you recommend using data like what you guys provide and finding other ways to repurpose it in a digital marketing fashion, or do you recommend staying away from that?
Yeah. So one of the things I've worked with, so I was talking about phone home leads with some of those big agents, but some of the ways that I work with those agents, I've got a tool where I can take your existing data. Maybe you've bought a book and you've got this giant database of data, but it's old. Okay. I can take that data and update it and find the most current information for that person. Okay. And so you can use that now for retargeting. A lot of times I can get email addresses for the individuals. So you could take that and put it into retargeting campaigns, stuff like that. Or in Facebook, you've got the target audience tools that you can generate and like lead tools and stuff. So you could potentially take that data, create that as an import for Facebook and use that for lead targeting, right? If we need to get email addresses. So you're not just doing it based on a sort of marketing cohort, like you're doing it based on, hey, here's my exact list of people that I have, and you can let Facebook figure it out how you need to target them, right? So I've done that with a lot of agents. And what I've found is, it's very common for large agents to go through and say, okay, we need to work our win backs. I've got 10,000 win backs. I'm going to put my call team on those 10,000 win backs. I'll take that data, throw it through back to the data, which is a phone home lead system. And I'll say, you only have a chance to contact 30% of these people because they've moved out of state. We don't feel like their phone number is a high contact rate. We feel like their phone number is oftentimes disconnected, things like that. And then I can parse down the data that you have to the people that you actually have a shot with. Okay. And that's been a large value add for larger agents or people that have bought books, because they're like, I've got all this data. I don't know what to do with it, but that data is 10 years old. If you've made a phone call and they're like, I haven't lived there in 15 years. Well, that person has a trail of where all they've lived. I could find the most updated information for that person. And so it's just a repurposing of phone home leads, but the software that we built for it, but we can find more updated information for that person and make sure we have a good contact info for that person.
And what's that called? Back to the data?
Yeah, it's called Back to the Data. So, reach out to me. So at phonehomeleads.com, if you inquire or request to reach out, and I guess we could probably put it in the chat here in the comments or something like that. But you can reach out and we can talk specifically about that if you would like. But, to any agents that would find that interesting, that's, if you're opening scratch, obviously there's not much you can do with that. But if you've been open for a while, or I bought a book that's 30 years old, there's a lot of data there. Let's take it, find the most updated data for that person because they've likely moved, and work with that. So some people have also done that with age lead purchases. So they'll buy age lead lists and it's, archaic, right? And then I could take that data and find the most updated version of that. And, say these are people that have a certain type of car or something. I could take that data and find the most updated contact info for that person. And we can review it. And it's something to talk about. That tends to be a very specific use case depending on the agent. And I like to talk to them about it, like, hey, how are we going to use this and things like that. But that's called Back to the Data, which is a product that Phone Home Leads has.
I love it because I always think in terms of, how much bang for your buck are you getting with your own time, and especially like your team's time, who you pay a lot of money to do their job. And in your use case there of like 30% is eligible to potentially reach out to and like 70% is not. That means and I know most do this, if they just blindly throw sales reps into a data bank and they haven't done the work to clean it up and have intentionality,
Correct.
You're potentially wasting 70% of your payroll. So you're missing two boats there. You're missing opportunity and you're wasting money on payroll, which is wild. So
yeah, that's one of the things when Janie opened up her shop, that's one of the things we noticed. We're like, hey, there are common denominators here for people that we know aren't going to answer. Right. And so we started analyzing that, and that's how ultimately Phone Home Leads got built. But they're just really clear cues, right? If they're over 92, you probably shouldn't call them. That's just, I think, morally wrong, but you probably shouldn't call them. And there are other little indicators there. I've got a commonly disconnected number. Maybe they've moved states. Maybe they're on a do not call now, and we need to proactively look for that based on their new number that they have. And so these are all things that we try to identify with back to the data. And then, we'll talk about that with the agent.
Excellent. Well, this one's a question out of left field. I've never asked it before. You being a very valued vendor, and I don't even want to call you a vendor, because when I talk to agencies who use you guys, they see you as a true partner. But just through like semantics or whatever, let's just say in the vendor world, right? Serving agencies, helping them grow. What is the most interesting alternative vendor, not in the leads game or data game necessarily, but just overall, who have you come across maybe in the last year or two, Rob, that you go like, wow, that company is the black horse. Like they have a completely different approach than 9 out of 10 other vendors that are out there. Is there anything that's caught your eye where you're like, that's something that deserves to catch on?
Oh boy, that is a really good question. So
it's a proof we don't role play these interviews and they're real. So
yeah, I'd call that's it makes you stop and think, right? Like you got to take a few breaths to think about it.
We could circle back on it too.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate all the people in direct. So I'm a big proponent of personalization, right? And I think there are some very strong use cases for some of the direct mail pieces that can be highly personalized to a specific customer. And so a lot of those have been out there for a while. But I think they could be underutilized. I'm always very impressed with how people can run direct, certain direct mail campaigns. I thought it was really cool, the innovation that happened when people were bringing in Google Maps pictures of people's homes and putting it on envelopes. I thought that was really cool. Now, the problem is, as you mass scale it, the customer base gets used to that. Right. And they know to throw it away or they get freaked out. But that was really cool when that came out. I think the companies that work with potential telemarketers or outsourced contract labor that, can actually work for the agency and be a little more in tune with the agent and the agency's culture, right? And sort of pick up the local flavor for that agent. I think that's really impressive, the people that could do that. Not just outsourcing for outsourcing's sake, but outsourcing with intentionality, right? I could bring in somebody to help me, maybe a third party, a contractor or something like that, somebody to come in and help me, but they're actually a part of the team. And they can adapt to the locality of that agency. I think that's really important. So there are some, really cool tools out there. I believe you guys have done stuff like that. And I think that's really cool. That's a problem that needs to be solved. One of the things, so that's really it. You try to take some of these burdens off agents. And I think that's huge, especially as the price for employees goes up. It's like you can either increase the quality of data or you have to increase that volume, right? Like we were talking about at the beginning. So there are two ways to approach it. And I think that's really cool. So I've been really impressed with a lot of the originality in direct mail. And I've been really impressed with a lot of the originality in how companies have supplemented existing agencies when it's very hard to hire people. And so that's been very impressive on my end.
Amazing. And I circled personalization 9 times on my sheet, and it reminds me of a book that I want to give a quick shout out to. For those of you that are trying to get in that creative mindset of how do I personalize my marketing, I picked up a book, Rob, like 7 years ago called How to Get a Meeting with Anybody or with Anyone. And it's by a guy by the name of Stu Heineck. He was actually like a business cartoonist in like the New York Times. And I actually had a chance to meet him like 3 or 4 years ago. Really interesting gentleman. But he went and studied the most innovative hyper personalized campaigns that people have done in the space of business. And some of the stories that he shares in that book, And there's things you can pick up out of it. Like there's certain email templates and things, but a lot of it has to do with like hyper personalization with like personalized gifts. When I was prospecting the furniture space, trying to call on Ashley Furniture Home Stores to sell them training,
Yeah.
I used that book to come up with an idea to build a little, well, I would order a mini dollhouse table, but it
Yeah.
was like a very realistic. And I had a USB card that would say plug me in and play me, and it would be on the table taped in there in a little box. And I sent it to like 10 people, right? But these are $100 million owners. You could use this if you're a commercial agent in here, right? But think for your space, make it your own. But I just use the inspiration, sent it out. 8 of the 10 owners, because you plug in the card, I'm like, hey, thank you so much for plugging this in. Thank you for taking my gift. This is what we bring to the table, no pun
Hmm.
intended. And I would pitch the product. 8 out of 10 of them called my cell phone. And these were guys who I had
Yeah.
cold called for months, 20, 30 phone calls, never picked up. And they're calling me like, who are you? And so I love the idea of personalization. I just want to plug that book real quick because it's a roadmap for inspiration. There's like 100 strategies in there. I think he even put out a second edition of it. But I love that. And I think that's something that's super underutilized. Everybody wants the easy road, right? What's the easy button? What can I just click and put my credit card on and it solves my problem? It's like no such thing. Not if you want to
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah. And that can work if you're like the first person to it. But if I'm in a deep market, right, in a metro area, or maybe I'm a smaller agent, that's already being done. Right. So how are you going to distinguish yourself? Well, maybe you have an opportunity to get that extra level of personalization that the prospect requires. That people want to talk to a human,
Mhm.
and so if it looks like, hey, this person's actually done their not in a creepy way, but this person's actually done their research on me. I think that's important. And there's some really good tools out there. So sometimes you need to be able to spitball with people. So there are some really good tools out there. Like I recommend everybody to have a paid Chat GPT subscription. There's
Yes.
also a really good tool called mechlabsai.com, which uses a lot of different large language models, but it's got different, which are like Chat GPTs, but it's got different experts and apps and anyway, it's an AI tool, but it works very well if you need to think about your marketing and have an AI kind of review it, right? Or ask for ideas. And so mechlabsai.com, I've been pretty impressed with it and reach out to them. But they built their own tool that kind of is built off of case studies and scientific data into marketing. And I believe they're really on the forefront with regards to marketing and leveraging AI with marketing and coming up with like captivating titles, identifying your value proposition as an agent, identifying,
Wow.
good subject lines and stuff like that. There are different ways that you can use this tool to really build potentially your brand and, do it in a educated way.
Wow. So along those lines, just for context, I think most people here probably know who Mr. Beast is on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Hundreds of millions of followers on there. It's incredible the scale he's at. But if you go back and look at his old YouTube videos, he was a very early adopter. They weren't that great of videos back in the day. They were pretty rough. But what got him to win is he just went ahead and dove into it. Even though maybe it was a little rough around the edges, it was more about just getting in early. And I kind of see the same thing happening with AI now, where I think a lot of people get intimidated. They think that they've got to become an expert, and you start to go down the bunny trail, and it's like just get your feet wet. So for anybody listening who maybe look, the ones who are super users, they're already going to go YouTube every tool and figure it out. But
Yeah.
for those on here who are like, man, this is the 19th time I've heard AI, I think I need to jump into this. Are there any practical use cases for an agency owner or even a producer who's
Yeah.
listening right now where you're like, hey, just try this? That'll at least get you kind of used to the processes involved, and then you can expand from there.
Thank you cards, bulk emails from your agency to your clients. Like, hey, write me a thank you card for somebody that's been with my agency 5 years and her name is Sally, right? And they live wherever. Write thank you cards, right? Quote card. Hey, we're going to be out. Write me a clever email for we're going to be closed for Labor Day and send it to all my customers, right? You don't have to think about that. Write a clever out of office response. Like it doesn't have to be deep and thought out. And what I tell a lot of people is don't use AI like it's Google. It's not Google. Talk to it. Like if you have problems typing it out and you're getting too caught up in your thoughts, turn on dictation on your computer and talk to it and then hit enter. That usually works very well. One of the things that I tell people to do that do podcasts. So Andy, one of the things that we should do, just let's troubleshoot this right now, right? What can we do with AI here?
Yep.
If we take a transcription of this, of the conversation that we've had, throw it into a chat GPT or something and say, okay, find my top 10 takeaways of this in bullet points. Let's write blog posts about the top 10 takeaways. Now turn this blog post into a Facebook post. Turn this into a tweet. Turn this into a LinkedIn post. Turn this into that. You know, you can accomplish 80% of the task with 20% of the work. And so I think there are a lot of things out there, you know, you just kind of have to play with it. Or, you know, I've probably said a lot of word salad that didn't make any sense. You know, I'm going to be able to go back. I'll be able to take some of the conversation, you know, some of this here and say, hey, where did I get lost? Analyze this conversation for me. Where did I get lost? Where did I get in my head too much? And I started saying a whole bunch of things that didn't make sense. I didn't recognize who my audience was, and it'll be able to analyze that for me. So, you know, critiquing things. I've used AI taking pictures when I'm on trips to say, hey, give me the context of this image. What building is this? What does this say in Latin? What, you know, there's a lot of stuff that you can do there, but don't use it. There's no proper way to use it. People don't know yet. You know, there are probably all sorts of emergent properties of AI that are going to come out. And, but sometimes you just kind of have to talk to it and see what happens.
I'm going to throw it out there because we're all about bringing value into these. If anybody's watching and they're like, I like what Rob's saying, but I don't know even where to log in. Like literally, right? Like what URL do I go to? Reach out to me. Just message me on Facebook. I'll jump on Zoom with you. Absolutely free. Let's take some time because I'd love to show you. I'm not a super user. I'm pretty good, but I'm not a super user. But I can at least lead you to the water and at least get you in the space you need to be in to start doing a little bit of what Rob's talking about. But because there's so much to learn and it's so intuitive because it's, you know, it's really learning from humans anyway. So it gets better and better as you go. And it's amazing the possibilities.
And it's the worst it's ever going to be right now. You know, like it's the worst it's ever going to be. So that's why you want to learn how to use it. All the top marketers right now are using it. And again, if I can offload 80% of the task, right? If I'm not writing my own Facebook post, my own LinkedIn post, my own Twitter posts and stuff like that, let ChatGPT do it in your voice. Hey, this is happening in my hometown. You put it in there, write me a post about the football game that's coming up on the 27th.
Yep.
At least you get it out there, right? And as you get the reps in, you're going to learn how to use it. And then at least you're doing the posts, which is 80% of the challenge, you know, and over time, over a year, you're going to learn how to use it better. You're going to find that one thing that gets interaction. That's what Mr. Beast did. You know, he found the stuff that worked, but you have to get your reps in first to find out what that is. There's no expert marketers, only expert testers and experienced marketers. Right. And so you test everything. So that's where that plays out. But I'd highly encourage everybody to go to mechlabsai.com. And they usually have some people that can walk you through how to properly use it as well.
Oh, beautiful. Mech Labs AI. Okay. Yeah. We'll drop that down in the chat during or after this as well. That's awesome. Well, I know we're kind of coming to a close here. We're about at our time. So really want to thank you again so much for being here. I wish we could be on here for like a 4-hour stream because I feel like with a guy like you and the way you look at things is just such a fresh perspective. And I'm so grateful that you were able to join us today. In parting, can you one more time just tell people how they can reach out to you, how they can get involved with Phone Home Leads or with Janie and just connect with you all?
Sure. So my email is rob@phonehomeleads.com. You can certainly reach out to me that way. I also have a website, phonehomeleads.com, that you can go there and reach out, fill out a form, and we can schedule a Zoom call and we could talk more directly about your agency and the type of things that we can do for you. So if that's back to the data or if that's finding targeted homeowner X dates for your area, they're exclusive to you and the price point's very is very good. And then we could talk about, you know, how I can help, or, you know, if you have some ideas to bring to the table, or if you're even a vendor watching this and you're like, hey, I think that we could improve some of the data that we have, or maybe I've got something that you can add to your product. I love spitballing and coming up with ideas. You know, I try not to, I love working with people. I love seeing people succeed. Like that's the biggest thing. I love seeing people win. So I'd love to talk to you and see how I can help your agency.
Incredible.
Or company, or vendor, or just chat. We could talk Star Trek if you want.
I know I'm kind of bummed we didn't have time to get to Star Trek. So actually, I had that on my menu today.
Sir Patrick says hi.
That's strong. Man, I really, really appreciate you guys. I appreciate you and Janie. I think what you're doing is great because it's all solution focused. It's not sales focused, and you guys really engineer solutions for a lot of individuals and businesses out there. So you guys keep crushing it, and really, really appreciate you being here today.
All right, I appreciate it, Andy. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again for joining us for another weekly episode of Ask the Experts, where we bring you experts from all over the industry to bring innovative ideas and solutions and experience to you so that hopefully you can go out there and get 1% better every single day. My name's Andy. We'll see you next week on Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Thank you for being here.